Welcome to the panel discussion. So feel free to ask anything. A root environment. How long time will it take to set up such at a given company?
Everybody's looking at me. Should I start?
I know, I was trying to look for, is Thomas here? I mean, he's the one who should speak about it.
Yeah, I can answer for him. So I divide this question to two. So the first one is how long does it take to set up a platform? So setting up a platform depends, of course, of the organization size. If we look at the OP group, which Tuomas presented earlier, the actual setup time was like between 1 and 2 months, basically. But then the kind of the implementation time and how, to be honest, how the management binds to getting everybody on board, because you can do it by switch, like saying that, okay, whatever you used yesterday, you're not using today, goodbye. And that's one way of doing it. It's pretty harsh, but usually it's always the fastest way of doing it. It brings some harm, but if we look at the traditional big companies, they anyway have trouble shipping in schedule. So that's one option. sorry guys. Yeah, but for what comes to, say, the ethical route, which combines tools that the organization usually already uses, like the version control and Jira tracking, and then maybe Jenkins, some continuous integration, the cloud environment, it doesn't take so long. So I'd say a month roughly. And then if you look at it from the business point of view, I'd say 6 months would be good time to invest in it as an organization.
I mean,
so just setting up the platform so that it is ready for use, it's a matter of days. Yeah. So let's say within a week you will have a platform that is ready for use, since we've automated the installation and everything's pre-integrated more or less. And that week includes a day of training to the platform users.
Thomas is selling the platforms. But yeah, in Telia we did it in a few days.
Yeah.
Well, Effico did it. But,
but like as said, question is bifold. Like you can, because it's, of course, everything's automated.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And now when you have containerized it, it's like ordering, click.
Yeah, of course. But it doesn't happen in the organization at that speed.
We are still working on it.
Yeah.
That was 2 years ago. So yeah.
That's a different thing, though. Buying the platform, getting it set up, and making it useful versus the full implementation. It's a different level of strategy.
All right. Next question. What is your greatest challenges implementing Devops? And I don't know if it's either one of you or from personal. It's just what it's...
Any one of you two guys, maybe? You already answered this.
I'll let you start off. I'll have a attack with this too.
I think with DevOps, one of the things I mentioned in the best practices is starting, because by profession I'm an architect and a solution architect. So starting architecture late, I've seen a lot of people try to get around it, and I've seen components already depicting something else during the sprints, during the code merges. The 3 or 4 components doing the same thing. Now architecture is also with deployment architecture and how code releases are done. Code integration happens, but people don't think through to how release management happens. And similarly within the deployment framework, the tools being used, I've seen 3 to 4 tools being used for the same thing. And one developer or one team justifying use of one tool, one team justifying use of another tool. So some of those maybe upfront planning is very important from a DevOps perspective, or my perspective. My clients generally are similar. We ask them to plan upfront, and we deploy with them.
Yeah, in my experience, I would say one of the things, believe it or not, that is a challenge depending on your organization is current contracts you have with hosting vendors or service providers, because they're contracted maybe in sort of a waterfall, sign-off, operational mode, uptime, and those SLAs that they're either being bonused on or penalized against are only what they're going to be looking at. And you might need to, early on, as you start to carve out how and what you're going to work on, begin to address that. Maybe you want to stay with that particular hosting vendor and they're going to become a partner in this, but the conversation has to be had, and maybe an amendment to a certain set of servers, applications, the way they're supported and hosted is put in place that doesn't change the existing broader frame. It's like fertilizer on the ground, and it sounds seamless, easily, but it actually can be a big obstacle when you have different organizations working on critical pieces. It's not all internal. The biggest thing I think we ever had a challenge on was when I started, it was myself and 5 guys, and we were very much focused on one large program, several different teams working in one application, which was the original online application. As we broke away and started to support other applications, we had it down, we had our pipeline, we had our mechanisms, we were allowing other people to use it. But what we did to help facilitate them was take on the responsibilities that needed to be within the teams in order to get them off. The idea was we could show how this scaled nicely from one large program of feature sets to several different application types and even the different infrastructure types with nuances. Then we became a problem of our own success. The more application teams we put onto it, the more we followed that same pattern. And we, as this kind of core enabler team, became the biggest choke point. We call it the hamster wheel. You just couldn't ever run faster because, frankly, people started thinking, that's DevOps work. Not really. That's the team's work. When does a development team not deploy onto their own test server, right? But because it was the framework that was doing it, it became someone else's responsibility. And that cultural shift of responsibilities was a very hard pattern to break. And I called it a year of penance when we finally got rid of a lot of that last stuff while I was working there because of that. But it was a valuable experience on the scalability of your processes, but also the importance of making sure that if you have, like I believe you said, Marko, a lot of companies have this DevOps team. It's great to have that as an enabler team. They can help foster and get people moving. But the responsibilities of creating the Jenkins files, of running the code, deploying it, all that stays with the teams, right? You build it, you run it. That's something you really have to anchor with them.
In Rovio, the creator of Angry Birds, who now successfully finished their IPO, what we did there in their infrastructure team was, because game developers can be personalities and the game developers are still the biggest asset that company has, what we did in the infra team was to build interfaces to the development tools and the practices the teams were using so that we got them all on board the same environment or ecosystem through integrations, like having, if you like Visual Studio, just use that. If you're coding on this particular platform with these libraries you're using, just fill in this configuration file, click enter, you're going to have the development environment set up for you, which is connected to the ecosystem. So those are things that you can do in the background, but just as said, the responsibilities have to be in the team.
Comments or questions? All right, moving on to the next question. How would you handle an organization with a us versus them mentality between dev and ops? I think that's a classic. Ooh, come on, guys.
You want to start with this?
Yeah, I would invite them for a beer, perhaps. That's a simple way. Then there's also a thing we discussed yesterday with beer about creating a market for DevOps. For instance, if we show to the windmills and the decision making that certain teams are able to release quickly into production and have their own way of working close to DevOps, then you shout about that loud enough and you advertise that success into someone who makes the decisions in company so that they start expecting that from everyone. So that creates a certain pressure for dev and ops to come their ways in dealing together, and because the decision making is creating market for DevOps. then they have seen how it can be done. And I don't try to figure out everything by myself. I let the decision makers do their work also.
In Finland, we also have sauna, which I would highly recommend here. And we actually tried the equivalent with Markus just last summer, which is jumping naked into the canal during the day and trying to avoid the cops, which we both did eventually. So something like that also might help.
I don't think I would go that far. I actually have had this experience quite personally, and I mean, in my time when I was at Maersk, I started with Maersk Line IT, which was all the development side of it and those projects. I survived and went through 4 major reorganizations that you probably read about in the news in many different ways, and was moved at one point into the group infrastructure, which was supporting all the infrastructure across, although what we did was only focused on the liner business because of the application, so it was a bit isolated, and then back before I was done. And so I was very intimate with both sides and the needs, right? I could talk about it, I understood it, I've been there, I had the calls at 3 in the morning, and I was responsible for helping these teams push code and get it released as frequent as possible. But the territorializing is very real. And it can be very negative. And this is where it's a two-pronged thing. The leadership must absolutely engage at this point. And one of the things is that you create a sharing of responsibilities and KPIs. There is no us and them. It's you guys and women together, and just like a platoon of Marines, this person's slagging off, everybody hit the deck and does push-ups. The ops and the developers and the people working together have a common goal. And you carve it out, right? All of operation doesn't have to have it. But these people, you've been designated, must create a way to develop, build, create, and throw away environments at will, and then keep going all the way up and through production. That is your goal. That is your mission. And you are measured against that. So you can take away some of the weight and free them up. But I think you have to blend that together, those responsibilities and the people, without a fail. Otherwise, you still have that. And the top leader really has to take the head of the operations and the head of the development and bring them together and say, you two are both pegged for your bonuses, if it's a bonus-driven thing, on that. So that you don't let this slide underneath you because you say you have too many other things. It does come, depending on the size and the nature of your organization, from the top. And it has to be pushed into focus. Otherwise, those old patterns of working will never go away. It's like a sandcastle on the beach. You can start to build it, but as soon as the tide comes in, it can just wipe it away. And a lot of inertial weight in organizations is just like a wave.
I think I would agree with that a little. So I've sat with clients where I've sat with development teams separately who've had great ideas. I've sat with operations teams who are different, database teams, administrators, then the security people, and finally the business people, who nobody involves in the decision. And we've done the entire drink sessions, and one of the approaches was we ask one of the teams to invite on our behalf. And we get everybody together, they talk about their issues, they sort things out. Tearing people away from different organizations and making a project team is effective, and as you rightly mentioned, rewarding them. So rewarding them for the releases, the quicker releases, as that happens, might also reinforce some of the behavior.
Cool. Then on being on the team talk, we have a question from Mr. Anonymous. Should we have a dedicated DevOps team or implement ops into the existing dev team?
I'll answer it first here.
You're welcome.
So there is a website called devopstopologies.com. Go in there.
It's called what?
devopstopologies.com. Go there, read it. Like it's only a few, like it has kind of the anti-patterns and patterns of good DevOps. And one of the anti-patterns is DevOps team in between development and operations without an expiry date. And so I would recommend highly to go in there and see what kind of different patterns have emerged from large and small organizations in implementing DevOps.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think what you have to do, when I spoke before I joined Defecode at this similar conference in the end of 2016, November 2016, I used as a slide the structure in the organizations that I just mentioned, where and how we fit. And we actually migrated through, I think, 3 or 4 different of the topology areas based on our placement and our scope of responsibility. And that was a very valuable learning experience because the unit as a whole was adapting and continually improving, you might say, as the organizational shifted. Because that was out of our control, but yet we still had to try to spearhead how the tools were used within the teams consistently and scale that at whole, no matter where they were. So the topology, DevOps topology that Marko mentioned is a really good site. It's clean. You just roll through it. You can find it pretty simply and identify where you are. But then you need to, I think, in your scope of your strategy, define how long should we be here. It doesn't have to be an exact amount, but starting off with a DevOps team is more, I think, about the people who engineer your pipeline and get the assembly line working. And then it's a matter of sharing that outward so that the responsibilities of them, even if they're just the maintenance crew that keeps the assembly line up and they set up new assembly lines or whatever it is, the delivery stream comes into the development testing and that operation. So they're carved out as a niche as opposed to saying, well, we're in operations, we're doing this. And maybe those people can extend their skills far better by sitting in with operations for periods as they bring them in and sitting in with teams and doing DevOps dojos to get new teams off the ground and running. And then they're sort of like Johnny Appleseed, spreading the word, spreading the seeds and the knowledge all throughout the organization without having, you might say, inherent responsibility laid right on top of them.
Cool. Next question. That's an easy one. Even I can answer. Does Defecode provide Nintendos for employees?
I haven't got mine yet.
Yeah. But hey,
haven't?
we got a thing in FE called BNP. People think it stands for Bruttonationalprodukt, but that's actually beer, Nintendos, and popcorn. So if that's what it takes, come on, we'll get you a Nintendo. Come work with us. Next question.
No, but I'll add to this. This might sound slightly...
This is serious.
This might sound slightly tacky, but I want to share it since we're here. I have 3 kids, and we have at the Helsinki office, we do have both the Nintendo and also a Steam account with heaps of games. So my kids know to ask every Sunday, if we're going to your office, Dad, just to play Steam. So it's kind of the culture we're also trying to build at Defecode, to feel home. I was thinking of like a year ago when we moved to the Helsinki offices, I was thinking of a T-shirt that would say that my home is my other home, and then Defecode logo on the back. But it, as said, too tacky. So I wanted to share it.
Cool. Next question. What is a good goal regarding code coverage?
There was a tool that I used for code coverage. I just can't. I think Sonar. Sonar is a good.
Yeah,
tool.
Sonar is a good one.
Yeah.
Or Sonar Cube nowadays.
Sonar Cube, yes.
Well, yeah, they're looking for a goal.
A goal? Sorry.
Maybe percentage. I don't know. Code coverage.
Yeah. I'll say one. No, I won't. Just kidding. No, there's no, it's ridiculous to try to, even, I was slightly cautious when you guys started talking about the business targets and then bonuses attached. Yes. It works somewhere, but attaching a bonus to, say, code coverage is, well, it's crazy. You get what you measure, and it's never what you want or what you need. So I would say that if you see in Sonar Cube that your coverage is 0 or say 15%, you know that you have a problem. But probably the problem won't be solved by getting to 85, say.
Okay. Well, a question from somebody in manufacturing. What are the biggest differences in DevOps transformation projects in embedded environments compared to pure server-based Was that too tricky?
I don't have direct experience with that, but I do know a reference that I saw. I forget what his position was. He was pretty high up in HP, and it had to do with the HP firmware printer. Maybe some of you have seen it online. If you look it up, the gentleman, I think he was like a VP of engineering and delivery or something like that for HP at the time. And that was their problem, taking this huge and lots of people and getting the printer, the HP printer firmware, updated and agile so it could be delivered and so forth. And it was really an impressive presentation when I saw it a couple years back, and because you can go online and see it, it's worth the 30 minutes to watch. To me, it's probably one of the best examples that even within a firmware type environment, DevOps works and it facilitates and aligns with the manufacturing output that they had. But I can't give you any more details. It's been a while. I forget. I apologize for that.
Yeah, and at least I'm always barked at when I say that you should just try to find a way how to attach the embedded development, also the hardware side, to the team. That's why my material, I said that independent, self-sufficient teams, it includes the hardware. And in current organizations, it's almost impossible because it feels so wrong to just have the hardware silo together with the software silo. But that's the future anyways. I don't know how you're solving it. I have some ideas. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's the future.
And some companies, especially telecom companies, are figuring out how to make the hardware as software, like through digitalization. And for instance, we have virtual networks, software-defined networks, and so on. So we are actively doing the work of figuring out how to move from hardware to software. Exactly. So, yeah, doesn't really answer the question, but hey, I got to speak.
Okay, we're coming up on the 3:30 mark, where we just are having fun, more coffee and tea to drink, and last chit-chat amongst fellow men and women. This one is actually kind of funny. Chris, I don't think it's personal.
Yeah. I saw it up there.
Yeah, I know. And tearing down the wall of confusion, I think it's a good point. If you would be Mr. Trump, how would you push DevOps in public organizations without building great walls?
Bye.
Terrible question. But as the Yank in the room, I will apologize. I had nothing to do with that nonsense. I live here, so I'm kind of removed. I try to not watch the news. I think the best example of how to go about it in a government organization, well, a U.S. government organization, is to, if you think back several years ago, under Obama, an actual real president who acts presidential, when they did the Affordable Care Act's online portal, and within a day or two, the whole thing crashed, right? And it was a big blow up. It was a political, red herring, because it's like, oh, no one wanted this, and then this is another thing of a failure, and what did they do? Well, I worked as a defense contractor once upon a time when I was back in the States for almost 2 years, and I saw the inefficiency of just the government procurement process, let alone the processes that go into developing, checking off, and everything else. That failure was, I would bet dollars to donuts, and I wasn't in it, a huge fault of contract, subcontract, and it was all over the place, and it was nothing but a mess, and that's why it fell over in 2 days. But as a corrective action, and I think because the executive branch or whatever it is took control, they went to Silicon Valley, they got some crazy smart DevOps people, engineers from there, they brought them in, and within, I think, 90 days, they had carte blanche and revamped it and got it up on its legs and everything else. So where there's a will, there's a way. But the processes that led to getting the people to do the work initially really were the biggest obstacle to actually doing something. It wasn't about the coding and the architecture. I'm sure there was a lot of that in there. But I think you have to, and I'm not a government person, you have to challenge some of those aspects in the modern world of delivering IT to government needs. Government has a very big business driver of being transparent, right? And some of its ability to meet that for the public's need and transparency is slowness, right? I mean, if you work at agile speed the way Silicon Valley does, that's way too fast to be considered transparent and maybe even good for government. But there's a balance too. And I think that's the trick that you have to look at. And I think probably many governments are in the same boat when it comes to opening up their tenders and doing it and so forth. I wish Jan was here because I'm sure he could give you a little bit from the Danish skatteministerlig way of doing it and what that limits them from being able to get what they need at times.
Any last questions? On that bombshell, please give a great hand for Asif, Chris, Sami, and Marko.